Stocks, real estate, and bond markets have reached record levels. Technology giants now make up almost a third of the total market value. Housing prices have far exceeded the peaks of 2008, and government debt has reached uncontrollable levels. Banks, investment funds, and retirement systems are tightly interconnected. Saying that everyone is at risk is no longer an exaggeration. So how is such a fragile system still standing? And most importantly, what would happen if this bubble bursts? The world is on the edge of a very serious risk, and to understand it, we need to take a closer look at financial markets. In recent years, stock prices have risen at an incredible pace, especially in the technology sector, which seems unstoppable. Some companies now represent almost a third of the total market value, and this is a major warning sign for everyday investors. People are buying stocks based on faith in artificial intelligence and technology, as if the value of everything will automatically rise in the future. But the truth is more complicated. Some stocks have reached price-to-earnings ratios that are unprecedented in history. For example, companies like Nvidia have P/E ratios exceeding 60, which is a warning sign for investors. If market expectations are not met, the drop in these companies' value could spread to the entire stock market. The danger is not limited to a single company. The so-called Magnificent Seven tech companies alone make up about 30% of the total market value. This means that in the event of a major collapse, not only one company, but an entire group of companies, along with investment funds, retirement funds, and small investors, will be affected. The current excitement and hype is reminiscent of the internet bubble of 1999. Back then, internet companies rose very quickly and eventually crashed. Today, tech stocks are even more concentrated, and the impact would spread across a much larger area. So, it is not enough to simply say that stocks will fall. The entire system would be affected, and the domino effect would be inevitable. Excessive valuation in the stock market is only one indicator. People believe something is valuable, investors buy with hope, and this confidence is extremely fragile. The market constantly moves based on expectations, and the loss of trust can create a chain reaction. When companies report losses or there is an economic shock, prices fall rapidly and investors rush to sell in panic. This does not only affect the United States, markets around the world are interconnected. A major collapse in the American stock market would immediately impact Europe, Asia, and developing countries. The financial system has become a tightly connected network, and even a single disruption can shake the entire system. Risks in the stock market are a serious problem, but the real estate market is equally fragile. Housing prices in many cities have far exceeded the peaks of 2008. People buy homes or invest thinking prices will always go up, but this will not always be the case. Debt from mortgages puts significant pressure on household budgets, and when payments are missed, a domino effect starts very quickly. The real danger, however, lies in commercial real estate. Nearly half of office buildings are empty, and investors are not receiving rental income. Shopping malls face a similar situation. With interest rates rising from 3% to 7 to 9%, renewing and repaying loans has become much harder, indicating that major defaults are imminent. Defaults in commercial real estate will not only affect property owners, banks, large funds, and investors who finance these debts will also be impacted. For example, an investment fund may have provided loans for hundreds of office buildings. If rental income drops and debts cannot be repaid, the fund suffers losses that affect retirement funds, banks, and individual investors. A chain reaction collapse becomes inevitable. Financial experts warn that a commercial real estate crisis could be even more widespread than the 2008 housing crisis. At that time, problems mainly affected individual homeowners and banks, but now massive funds, insurance companies, and retirement systems are at risk. This imbalance in the real estate market is not just an economic problem, it is also a social risk. If commercial real estate collapses, companies may close offices, unemployment will rise, regional economies will suffer, and people will lose jobs. Banks will lose capital, lending will become harder, and economic activity will slow down. Everyone is affected because the economy has become a fully interconnected system. Bonds used to be considered a safe haven for investors. People trusted government debt and received interest with the assurance that their money was secure. But things have changed. The US federal debt has reached $36 trillion, with annual interest payments of $1.2 trillion. This has become the largest budget item for the government. Options to pay off the debt are limited. Increase taxes, cut spending, or print money. But printing money triggers inflation and increases the cost of living. Raising taxes is politically difficult and slows the economy. Spending cuts threaten social services and investments. Bonds are no longer a safe investment. Any disruption in the bond market affects not only governments, but also companies, banks, and retirement funds. These bonds are used as collateral in the financial system. Banks accept bonds as collateral for loans, and retirement funds hold them in their portfolios. If bond values fall and debt repayments cannot be made, banks suffer losses and investors panic. This can trigger a chain reaction collapse. All this debt is interconnected. A crisis in one sector can domino through the entire system. The vulnerability of the bond market, combined with the government's limited borrowing capacity, increases the danger. Low interest rates limit the central bank's tools during a crisis, and printing more money risks inflation, further destabilizing already fragile prices. In this environment, bonds are no longer a safe haven, but a risky investment. Compared to the 1929 Great Depression and the 2008 Great Recession, the potential crisis in 2025 to 2026 is far more complex and could have a much wider impact. In 1929, the crisis mainly originated in the stock market, and only 10% of Americans owned stocks. The effect on the majority of people was limited. Today, about 58% of Americans are directly tied to the market through retirement accounts and investment portfolios. This means that a potential collapse would directly affect millions of households, not just hundreds of thousands. In 2008, the housing bubble burst and led to a banking crisis. Central banks reduced interest rates, governments launched bailout packages, and bank mergers stabilized the system. Now, central banks and governments have very limited tools. Interest rates are near zero, printing money would increase inflation, and fragile price balances would be disrupted. The global economy is also weak. China's growth has slowed, Europe has not fully recovered, and developing countries are burdened with debt. Global cooperation is limited. This crisis could affect the entire world, not just one country. The difference this time is not only the scale of the collapse, but also the fragility of the system. Financial instruments, investment funds, retirement funds, banks, and governments are all interconnected. When a problem arises in one place, the domino effect triggers a chain reaction. Traditional solutions from past crises will not be enough, and everyone needs to be aware of this reality. The signs of the approaching recession are clear. First, the inverted yield curve, where short-term interest rates are higher than long-term rates, is a classic indicator of recession. This suggests the economy will slow within 3 to 12 months. In commercial real estate, $2 trillion in maturing mortgages will come due, putting significant pressure on payments. Regional banks, like SVB, have already failed, serving as a warning. If the crisis deepens, dozens more banks could face the same fate. The concentration in the market of the Magnificent Seven tech companies is another risk. These 7 companies represent about 30% of total market value, and executives selling record amounts of their own shares indicate potential panic sales. Legendary investor Warren Buffett holding record levels of cash, and the Buffett indicator at 185% shows that even experts recognize the danger. Other economic indicators are alarming. Unemployment is rising, credit card debt and delinquency rates are at record levels. Auto loan delinquencies are at 7.5%, the highest since 2009, and millions of student borrowers are unable to pay. Global geopolitical risks, including tensions in Ukraine, the Middle East, and Taiwan, increase the risk of stagflation. Major corporate real estate players are starting to default. All of these indicators point to an impending collapse. Once triggered, the domino effect will be unavoidable. A decline in major tech companies will first affect investment and retirement funds. Small investors will panic, and sales will accelerate. Next, commercial real estate defaults will increase. Empty offices and shopping malls will no longer generate rental income. Banks will lose capital, and regional banks will begin to fail. The bond market will also collapse, making debt payments impossible. And companies, households, and retirement accounts will suffer significant losses. In this process, stocks could fall by 65 to 80%, real estate by 40 to 60%, unemployment could exceed 15%, and 58% of US households could be directly affected through retirement accounts. Recovery may take 10 to 20 years instead of the 5 years seen in previous crises. Social safety nets will be under severe pressure. Job losses and economic hardship will increase social unrest, and political instability will become inevitable. This scenario is dramatic, but it is based on data and current economic indicators. Being prepared is crucial. Reviewing savings, debts, and investments, understanding risks, and taking informed steps will be your strongest defense in such turbulent times. This crisis will not affect just one country. It will shake the entire system, with long-lasting consequences. Therefore, financial awareness and strategic preparation are the only ways to survive this coming wave. Ignoring the situation, failing to recognize changing risks, and not acting proactively will leave no option but to suffer the consequences.